Hey YouTubers, a bunch of my motorbikes use these little 2-horse Briggs & Strattons. This is a late model magnetron ignition, and it's got a sloped gas cap, so you really can't put a whole lot of gas in it. The old kind here, this old cast iron David Bradley oddball motor, interim motor, it's got a little deeper, but you still, I'm a heavy man, and you know, I'm leaning on this throttle pretty good on these, getting them going. If you get too far away from home, you can end up pedaling the damn thing to the nearest station. Then they don't want to sell you but $1's worth of gas. And you just got to leave the rest in the hose or in the pump, but no big deal. But anyway, to keep from running out, I thought years ago about putting the tank up above and just every now and then letting a little run in, but you'd have to, it would just be a holding tank. You couldn't really regulate it since there's no float on these carburetors. Even if you sealed the gas cap off, I thought about this as a young man, was sealing it off and putting a spigot on it. Well, with no float, the gravity would just override the carburetor and it'd flood everywhere. And it all pointed to it ain't worth the trouble. Go to this other kind of carburetor like I did on this, the float type, like I did on this little Kawasaki. It did have the uphill suction one. I used its tank for a tank, but I used a manifold and put an old Lawson Power Products carb on it. But speaking of power products, people are probably going to cry when they see what I'm fixing to do, because it's sacrilege to a two-cycle Tillotson two-cycle carburetor. No, it ain't bowed real bad, so it ain't been on and off a million times with a half dozen gaskets. It's got the choke lever underneath. It was a 2-cycle and got spring-loaded throttle blade similar to a Tecumseh. So that carburetor's really an oddball. It would work on a 4-stroke, but it's off of a 2-stroke, some kind of 2-stroke. All right, what I'm going to do, this carburetor and tank here ain't no good, are not any good. The carburetor is cracked all the way around, so it's ready to fall off. The motor must have fell off a bench or something. The tank I sandblasted it years ago, but the bottom was paper thin, and I soldered it and bonded it. It looked so bad, I decided I'm not going to use it. It's even too ugly for my poor taste, and I'm not overly picky. So I got to thinking, what can I make a float bowl? I thought about taking the top off one of them Briggs & Strattons, like what's on this big 8-horse back here in the background. I thought about taking a lid like that and bolting it to one of these tanks way over on the side. The one that's too big, you have to cut the cap off, and then it would get awful close to the edge. One that's too big, you'd have the whole carburetor sitting there. It looks stupid. It would serve a purpose, but that ain't what I wanted to do. So what I ended up doing, I thought about taking this little Tillotson, which I've done taken apart for video reasons. Got the lid off, and somebody made their own homemade float pin out of a piece of coat hanger that didn't fit it right. It was way too small, and I'm sure the float probably drug on the inside. Well, maybe not. But see, on these Tillotsons, the distance of the float bowl keeps the pin in the float. So I made a new float pin out of bigger wire and mashed it flat on the end, like some carburetors are. I think Lawn Boys are that way from the factory, where you got to barely bump them to get them in and out. You have to take them back out the same side you put them in, or you'll split these little ears off of them. But here's my deal. I'm hoping this is going to work. It might bite me in the butt and not work good, but let me get my crap together, as they say. This old Harley Davidson golf car voltage regulator lid. Let's see. I'm going to take that lid. I'm going to take this. I'll cut a gasket for that lid. It's got 2 holes in the bottom, and they sink in real deep, so that'll be good, because I can cut some good washers, or maybe even find some I've got some material out of a hand-operated gasoline pump that would make good gaskets for that I know would hold up to gas, because that's what they're for. They're out of a Tokheim hand pump. I made a diaphragm for a Kohler out of one of them great big dinner plate looking diaphragms. I'm gonna take that that lid. I've already got it drilled and tapped. Put it on there. Put this gasket on there after I refine it a little. Ain't no need to refine it for the video because I'm not going to bore you to tears, and I'm not going to start it today or put it on the bike today. But this will go back down in here, and the carburetor. Get my phone in coordination with my hand here. Kind of hard sometimes to do. Carburetor will sit right there. I can trim off all the rest of that gasket, but that's what I'll have. A small float bowl made out of a voltage regulator lid. Thought about using a baby food jar, but I don't want to trust glass down here in my basement. Not going to do it. Nope, wouldn't be prudent. Not going to do it. So that's how I'm going to get around running out of gas. But secondly, and you probably heard me say this on some of the other videos if you've seen them, secondly, these carburetors with this kind of tank and just one sucker tube, if you're running down here on this much gas, you got to richen up your mixture a little because it takes more vacuum to suck that gas uphill than it does when it's all the way full. And vice versa, when you're all the way full, you got to lean her out a little bit. That's why they make them long and flat instead of deep. And when they did start going deep, like the 3s and the 5s, they've got two suckers. One that pulls it up out of the long tank and drops it over into a little bitty thimble-sized tank. I've said it a dozen times, but a lot of people don't know it, and I didn't know it for a long time. I was probably in my 20s when I finally figured out that they had an internal tank that they actually ran on. I'm 64 now and been fiddling with them all my life. But this will keep the level. Wherever that float designates, that's where the level will always be in this deal. That'll be the bowl. This will be the middle wafer. This will be the gasket between the two pieces. This Tillotson, and the Tillotson has a spring-loaded needle valve. I like that. So it's got constant load on it. And by being on a little bitty rectangular tank like this, tipping it sideways ain't going to make much difference. If I had my float on here, say I had the float right here, with this carburetor that away, and I tipped my bike way over, it could let in more, well, actually it would be the other way. If I tipped it over this way, it could let way more fuel in as the float hangs down. This way, it'll be more like any other motorcycle carburetor. It'll be determined by a small, well, it's actually square. It ain't rectangular, it is square. So, I think I'm onto something here. Been wanting to do this for a long time. Haven't done a video for a week or two. I said to myself, it's a good day. It's kind of yucky outside. Good day to coop up in the basement and make something. There it is for old Briggs & Stratton's. Plus, it won't that you want to put a tank on the top bar like that El Cheapo China tank there. A guy gave me. Bless his heart. He knew I fiddle with bikes, and he said, "You need this." And really, the regulator ain't hurt. Somebody's got a bad one. All they got to do is put their lid on this one and go right on with it. And neither is that Tecumseh two-stroke carburetor. If somebody needed one of them, the throttle shaft has no play. But that's unlikely. I'm probably the last cat out there fooling with old junk. Well, that's not true, and I know it's not. All kind of young guys even are fooling with old stuff. But I'll trim that gasket down, and on my next video, hopefully it'll be on a bike and running. Thanks for watching. John Wade on YouTube. 22 motorized bikes down here and in my shed. I ride one every day that it ain't raining, and some days when it is. Go out to lunch on them every day. Just to get in a little fun. Thanks for watching. John Wade on YouTube's where the other 22 are. Other 22 bikes. Bye-bye.